In December of 1931, church caretakers stationed in an isolated village in the English countryside vanished without a trace. Was their disappearance the result of a freak accident, or was there something more sinister at work? Join us as we revisit the still unsolved mystery of St. Elmo's Church. On the evening of December 4th, 1931, Reverend William Clark of the Northern Church Board stepped off the steps of St. Elmo's Church and climbed into his waiting car. Having shaken hands and bid farewell to his 3 colleagues, he now headed back to the main village. As his car made its way down the winding roads, he looked back at the 3 men he had left behind at the secluded church. Their names were George Adams, Thomas Miller, and James Cook. They stood on the steps, waving to him as he raised his hand to wave back. Not once did the thought cross his mind that he would be the last person to ever see them again. When the relief team arrived 19 days later, they were nowhere to be found. St. Elmo's Church, situated some 20 miles west of the nearest village, was to be the setting of this strange disappearance. Something about the mystery of these 3 men, isolated at the edge of the civilized world and surrounded by the vast and eerie countryside, sends a chill up the spine. The church itself had remained uninhabited for as long as anyone could remember. The villagers viewed the bleak and deserted building with great superstition. Although they often passed by it, they believed it very unlucky to spend a night there. During the 1920s, the Northern Church Board decided to restore the church. It took 4 years, and the building work was constantly hampered by the unpredictable weather, which made it very difficult to transport supplies. Nevertheless, the church was completed and went into operation on December 7, 1929. It had no wireless communication, and the only way of contacting the village was through visual semaphore-style signals, which could be seen on a clear day. The mystery begins on the night of December 15, 1931, when a sudden storm broke out in the vicinity. The first signs of anything amiss came when a traveling salesman, passing close to the church just before midnight, noticed that the church was eerily dark, something almost unheard of for an operational building like St. Elmo's. This was reported when he reached the village a few hours later, and although a dark church would have been considerable cause for alarm, no immediate action could be taken due to the harsh weather. The relief team was due to set out on December 20th, but because of the unfavorable conditions, they didn't actually set out until dawn on December 26th, carrying fresh supplies and the relief caretaker, Joseph Moore. As they approached the church, the leader of the relief team, Captain Henry Scott, gave 3 long blasts on the horn and set off a distress flare, but no response was forthcoming. It was obvious from the moment they arrived that something was terribly wrong. There was no welcoming committee from the 3 men who would normally have been outside to greet them. No provision boxes had been put out to be restocked, and the flag wasn't flying on the flagpole. Save for the eerie silence and the sound of the wind howling through the trees, the church grounds were eerily quiet. Joseph Moore set off towards the church alone. Upon reaching the steps, he immediately made his way up the incline and headed towards the main building, calling out to the 3 men as he went, but there was no reply. He found the entrance gate to the compound and main door both closed, and inside the church itself, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The lamps were cleaned and refilled, the beds were unmade as if the men had just awoken, the washing up was done, and there were cold ashes in the grate. After his initial observations, he spotted an overturned chair in the kitchen and noticed that all the clocks had stopped, which only added to his concerns. Returning to the team, Moore relayed these findings to Captain Scott, then made his way back up to the church with more men in the hopes of conducting a wider search. At the east entrance, everything had been intact, but the west entrance provided considerable evidence of damage caused by recent storms. A box at 110 feet above ground level had been smashed, and its contents strewn about. Iron railings were bent over, the pathway was wrenched out of its concrete housing, and a large stone weighing more than a ton had been displaced. Above that, on top of the hill, at more than 200 feet above ground level, turf had been ripped away as far as 10 meters from the edge. Further investigation revealed that the caretakers had kept their log until 9 a.m. on December 15th, and their entries made it clear that the damage had occurred before their disappearance. The only other significant piece of evidence was that 2 sets of rain gear were missing. Only 1 set of outdoor gear remained hanging in place by the entrance, suggesting that one of the men must have ventured outside without wearing his protective clothing, which was surprising considering the severity of the weather on the date of the last log entry, especially during a harsh winter. As for the caretakers themselves, there was no sign either inside the church or anywhere else on the grounds. They had simply vanished. Moore and 3 volunteer seamen remained behind to attend the duties of getting the church back up and running, while the relief team returned to the shore station. From there, Captain Scott sent a telegram to the Northern Church Board, dated December 26, 1931, stating, "A dreadful accident has happened. The caretakers Adams, Miller, and Cook have disappeared from the church. The clocks were stopped, and other signs indicated that the accident must have happened about a week ago. Poor fellows. They must have been blown over the cliffs or drowned while securing a crane or something like that." The riddle of St. Elmo's Church has been an endless source of fascination, inspiring stories, poems, songs, and even an opera. But the whole truth of the mystery may never be known. A number of embellishments have been added over the years. For instance, it was said that Joseph Moore discovered a half-eaten meal upon entering the church, a common detail in so many vanishing tales, but in this case it simply isn't true. Also false are the log entries regarding the caretaker's states of mind, which are frequently referred to but never actually existed. The only details recorded in the logbook refer to damage at the west entrance and minor documentation of the storms. There was nothing mentioned about Adams crying or Miller being irritable. These were fictitious details added many years later by a pulp magazine, perhaps to add more intrigue. Even so, no bodies were ever found, and no other clues were uncovered. We can only speculate as to what happened on those windswept grounds in that cold December of 1931. Theories have ranged from the mundane to the extreme. Some have suggested that one caretaker had murdered the other 2 and then thrown them and himself from the cliffs in a fit of remorse. Others suggested a wild animal had attacked the men, or that they had been kidnapped by foreign spies. Another alleged eyewitness account recalled that a boat full of spirits had been seen rowing towards the church on the night of the caretaker's disappearance. Of course, the legend of the Phantom of St. Elmo's was widely suspected locally, particularly in the latter half of the 20th century. Some have even suggested alien abduction. The simplest explanation, though, is usually the correct one. As the Northern Church Board concluded in their investigation, the 3 men were more than likely surprised by a freak wave and swept away. Thomas Miller and James Cook had probably gone to secure some of the damaged equipment at the west entrance, while George Adams had remained inside the church as procedure dictated. It was strictly forbidden to leave the church unattended at any one time. From his vantage point, Adams would have been able to see a large swell approaching the grounds and must have rushed outside in the hopes of warning his colleagues, but he got to them too late. Instead, all 3 men must have been caught in the oncoming wave and swept away. This would certainly explain the overturned chair, as well as the remaining set of rain gear, and also gives a reason as to why all 3 men had been outside at the same time. However, if Adams did leave in such a rush, why was the church door closed and the entrance gate to the compound locked? And how were 3 highly experienced men, who had spent countless hours surrounded by harsh conditions, taken unawares by a freak wave? If that was indeed the case, why had none of the bodies been swept back to shore, as usually happened in these waters? It seems there are still more questions than answers, and perhaps the reality could be far stranger than most of us allow ourselves to imagine. In any case, the church remained operational without further incident up until 1971, when it became fully automated. It is still in operation to this day, and the grounds are now only visited occasionally for maintenance purposes. Over the years, the grounds never quite lived up to their cursed reputation, as nothing out of the ordinary ever took place there again. But the mystery of St. Elmo's Church lives on, perhaps forevermore. In closing, we leave you with the words of Reverend Clark, who in his official report of January 8, 1932, said of the caretakers, "I visited them as lately as the 7th of December, and have the melancholy recollection that I was the last person to shake hands with them and bid them adieu.